Okay, so another type of lipid is what's called an ether lipid. These are another unique type of lipid, and they're usually referred to as plasmalogens. Now, these are a lipid that is an analog of our PE lipids or our phosphatidyl ethanolamines. They are very specific and common in heart tissue, but also found in some protozoa and bacteria. While their function is not very well understood, we know that they are there and again, common in certain tissues. It could be that they are there in those tissues because they are not as easily broken down or cleaved by very special proteins called lipases that cleave apart lipids. They might be there because they make membranes more rigid, or they could be a signaling lipid, or maybe an antioxidant. So this is an area that's still of research, but the difference between a plasmalogen and a PE lipid is right here. So you can see, just like on our normal glycerophospholipids, we have our glycerol backbone, which I'm highlighting. Here's position 3, where we have our phosphate. We have an ethanolamine head group. Here is position 2, and notice we have an ester linkage with a fatty acid. The difference is that right here on position number 1, instead of an ester linkage, we have an ether linkage. So this type of alkene is not a fatty acid that's directly linked on. Instead, it is another lipid, another type of alcohol lipid that is then attached to make an ether linkage. So in position 1, you have a slightly different scenario. These type of ether lipids are also important in certain compounds like signaling compounds, particularly one called the platelet activating factor. This is an ether lipid that is an analog of PC. So again, this has a backbone of a glycerol. We have our phosphate, but notice that the head group here is a choline. Here we have an ether linked alkane, so no ester. And we also, on position 2, have some acetyl ester group. Notice that this is not a fatty acid. This is just acetic acid, so just the short acetic acid that has been attached to position 2. This is another type of ether-linked lipid, but it is known to have signaling purposes. It is identified as a signaling molecule that is important to the aggregation of blood platelets, and it helps mediate in inflammation scenarios. So again, this is another type of ether lipid that has a head group similar to a phosphatidylcholine, but its tail portions are different.